coming from government technology. This is govtech.com, and we'll make sure we have all the links to any of the articles I'm in the show notes. So anybody that wants to go follow up and read the details. So the CIO, Alan Cunningham, he stepped down last November because he thought the job responsibilities had completely changed. And a few of the highlights of the article, he'd only been in the job since August of 2020, and the former CIO had only been there for about 2 years or so as well. So they've had a lot of high turnover there. And part of the problem that they were looking at, or as it was stated, and there's not a lot of context, and that's something I think you and I will talk about in kind of conjecture, but his primary concern was the state was requesting to create a 5 and 10 year technology strategy plan. And they were like, we can't use a crystal ball. How are you supposed to do this within 24 to 48 months? I mean, the exact quote from them was, technologists at the state level are trying to use a crystal ball to figure out what kind of tech do we use in the next 24 to 48 months. On top of that, they were short staffed. Many of the IT staff members were working long days. They were feeling burned out. They're with COVID and they're working from home. Everybody was stretching into nights and weekends. And also, Nevada had the requirement, if you were a state employee, you had to be a resident of Nevada. So it wasn't even like they could go find additional staff to go make up for some of the shortages. And then they felt, it was overwork, under resourced to make what was going on. So he finally, was like, I've had enough. I can't work under these conditions. So hearing all that type of stuff, what would you think, being in his role, would be? How would you have approached that type of situation?
I think you threw a lot of stuff out there, so let's unpack it a little bit at a time. And I think one of the first things that you laid out there was the fact that he's been in this position for less than a year, and his predecessor was in that position for 2 years or less. And so that right there tells me they've got an issue. They've got an organizational issue. There's something going on in there because CIOs are hard to come by. And at the same time, whenever you get a good one, you tend to keep them and hold on to them. They've gone through 2 and 3 years. I mean, think about that kind of turnover.
Yep.
Two CIO. I mean, we're not talking about an entry level tech position. We're talking about the guy who streamlines and runs the vision of technology for your organization. And you went through two of them in 3 years. That seems, I mean, that's an organizational issue just as much as it is an issue that he may have had. And I think that what he pointed out, or at least what was pointed out in the article, are things that business leaders are struggling with across the board, which is right now it's a volatile job market because everybody's looking for good tech people, and so finding good tech people are hard to find. Work from home has put a major stress on technology resources, and so now we're doing a whole lot more than what we have before. So now we're dealing with burnout. You got to be able to account for all of that as well. And so I think there's a lot that could go into why he resigned, and without talking to him, we don't know all the specifics of what was going through his head. But those are all challenges that we all face right now. As somebody who lives and breathes in the IT business and in the cybersecurity sector, it's what we deal with. We've got. I have to make sure that I'm managing and watching out for burnout, and making sure that not only I, but the rest of my team and my staff that they don't get burnt out. And so there's a lot of issues with I would say on the organizational side. There may have been a lot of technology issues, but this goes back to an organizational thing from my perspective as I read through the article.
No, I agree. I want to bring up a few specific points and conjecture a little bit. So I'm going to pull out my crystal ball based on this article not having some context. From a business standpoint, I wanted to know, and again, I know there's political processes involved when you're dealing with the legislature. I don't know if you have. I know I've worked on things at a state and local level for sure. Oh, well, even federal, I guess, in projects. But I do know that it's impossible to pick out specific technology in forward looking 5 to 10 years. That's an impossible task at the rapid rate that we're changing. So I truly wonder if an approach, that were they asking for specific technology, or are they looking for business priorities? Because I do think that you can prioritize business functions, and then once you get that priority, you go, hey, this project's going to be a year. This project may take 2 years, and you're going to identify that specific tech.
I
But
agree with that to an extent, because there's some situations that you come into, once again, without having the full optics on this thing, because what happens if I can forecast out 5 years and give you an idea of what we might need, but that's only if the things that are here are right. So, like if I'm on solid ground and I've got a solid foundation, we've got good operations, we've got this, that, and the other, then I can kind of forecast. Okay, if we want to have this function on in the future, what are our business goals? And this is stuff that we sit down and talk with business owners about all the time. What are you trying to do in the next 5 years, so that we can then wrap technology around it to help you get there faster. And once you get there, you're more efficient. You're ready to move on to the next thing. So I get them wanting to be able to say, hey, we want to forecast out. You're in the technology world. I wouldn't forecast out further than 5, because things are going to change. By the time you get there, everything that you were working towards may be obsolete by then, or at least it might be 5 years older by then. And so that's a challenge.
But I still challenge that the premise of going, when you're looking at a priority of the issues you're going to tackle. And I would sit there and bring this back to whether it's technology focused or not. Obviously it's CIO, you're going to be technology focused, but CIOs at this level need to be on value drivers. It's not, you have to avoid being that shiny object syndrome person. You've got to sit there and go, where are our big gaps, by talking to the stakeholders. We need to go talk to everybody that's involved, and sit there and go, where can we improve processes? Where can we provide more value, in this case, to the citizens of Nevada? Where are those things? Then go identify specific technologies in place, and then sit there, from that standpoint of building a strategy without looking at specific tools that may evolve, because that thing is because you've identified something that the impact is too minute to deal with. Now we've got something that's more pressing. Now, you would agree with that?
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, because not only that, but as you introduce new technologies or whatnot into your organizational workflow, it's going to present different issues that you didn't forecast and that you didn't see. So there's always going to be something that is creeping up. But for them to say, hey, we want you to put together a 5 to 10 year plan and have goal structures built around that, it's not realistic. It's not real. And as a business leader and a business owner, I don't know how. I mean, I wouldn't even try to put that in place, and I wouldn't even tell my clients to do that. Especially when it comes to technology. I mean, it changes too quickly. It's the fastest changing industry on the planet, hands down. I don't know of anything else that's changing faster than what technology is doing, and it's only going to continue to get faster with the way in which we're rolling out new things. There's new opportunities that are being presented because of technology. So to forecast out 10 years, I mean, just think about it. 10 years ago, what was technology like 10 years ago, and how many iterations have we gone through in the last 10 years? Forget the last 10. How many iterations have we gone through in the last 5, the last 2? Technology is changing so quickly. I mean, heck, now VR is becoming a real thing. How quickly did that come around? You know,
Let me shift gears real quick before we move on to the next topic. Particularly in this particular industry, or I don't want to say industry, you're dealing with government, and a lot of government comes from people that are currently elected. Now, I don't know if he experienced in his short time there a changeover in leadership. I have experienced this and have been witness to this on some projects where the new elected leader comes in with a new initiative. So particularly in this, where you may have changed over every 2 years or 4 years, I would say in most cases. I don't even know how you would even project that out, knowing that it's even a possibility. The state of Virginia, I'm in Virginia for anybody listening. The governor of Virginia is elected to 1 4-year term. He can run again, but he cannot run consecutively, even if he wanted to. Because we've had instances of the governor, there's been a gap and then they run again. McAuliffe, he lost this last election, but he's already been the governor, but he couldn't do it twice in a row. So you're guaranteed on the next election to get a change in leadership, change in priorities, shifting focus. So as a state level employee who may have been employed for 20 years through all that, how can you plan for that?
you can't.
You
You
can't.
can't.
I don't know that you can. Because I've seen it. I've seen something happen with political appointees on a government project come in, they're there for like 10 months before they get appointed to the next thing. And the teams are just kind of milling around and milling around and milling around.
Well,
So,
and that's a valid point. I think he made one more point in this article before we jump ship and move on. It's the fact that he said that the other employees or the other state employees and workers didn't understand what it actually took in order to bring about or to act against all the initiatives that they had in place. Which is something that I know that I find, and I'm sure that you've come across it as well, is that whenever you're working with C-level executives that don't understand technology, getting them to understand the speed in which things can or cannot move, or the things that need to get done before, and properly prioritize those things. This is where I would place a little bit of blame on Alan Cunningham whenever he decided to resign instead of stick it through. Is that it's your job as a CIO to paint that picture. It's your job to help them to understand and to bridge that gap for what technology is, and where it's at, and where, helping them to understand where they're at from a technology standpoint as an organization, and then understanding where they want to go, and what it's going to take in order to make that happen. That's your job as a CIO. You should be bridging that gap. You should be having that conversation. That's part of the job. And if you can't get them to buy in, because once again, we've all run projects, and if you don't have buy-in from the top to the bottom, then the chances of your project succeeding or ending where you want it to end are very slim. And so as a CIO, that's your job to lead that conversation and get buy-in from the top, so they get a better understanding of what it takes in order to do the things in which they're asking you to do.